Welcome to the life story of the Think.Feel.Do sensory bears. I'm the narrator. However, this really is a story of Brown Bear, the oldest of all the Think.Feel.Do bears, and his tribe.
It was a cold winter's evening and all was quiet across the land. Brown Bear was sitting in his comfy chair in front of the fire, sipping hot cocoa and reminiscing about his youth. He knew that he was created to help children across the world in all communities to be able to communicate what they think, feel and do. Brown Bear felt nostalgic and reached out for his photo album and thought about his life. In the front of the album was a family tree, and he gazed over the various strands of his family and thought about how he came to be. The family story that had been passed down to Brown Bear was that many years earlier, there'd been a branch of the family that had attended a childhood trauma conference and told their story in going on a bear hunt. That story was very inspirational and was carried back across the land to his neck of the woods.
I remember looking at the titles of the conference concurrent papers. I saw the title and decided I had to go listen to Going on a Bear Hunt. What I saw, experienced and felt I carried with me into my practice. I learnt about sensory bears and understood that the blank canvas of each sensory bear offered children and adults the opportunity to invent its life and character. The choices the children make about who their sensory bear becomes often tells us a lot about their own needs, how they see themselves and others in the world. I realise now that what I learned about sensory bears became part of my practice, my colleagues' practice, and one of the parts that helped the Think.Feel.Do sensory bears be born.
The story went that in Brown Bear's parents' time, there was a little girl who was so stuck in her trauma that she was not able to find a way to connect to her emotions. She would just shut down and retreat into her shell when any thoughts became too difficult. The people around her spoke of her struggles and remembered the inspiring story of going on a bear hunt and thought maybe this could help her. So her worker took along a sensory bear for the little girl to connect with and to help her identify and explore her emotions. The little girl loved her bear and named her Thunder Girl, and together they explored and expanded on the emotions the little girl was feeling, and she allowed Thunder Girl to tell her story in her language that she was able to understand.
A meeting of ideas happened that day. It consisted of an attitude of pace, Komochis, Kim Golding's stories, therapeutic love story work, and the concept of sensory bears. Through this combination, the child was able to make meaning of her love story.
And so, I'm going to introduce Thunder Girl.
The young girl I helped was not able to hear her story. She couldn't. She had a look in her eyes that looked like hurt, and she couldn't respond. She couldn't use her voice. She was able to say a few feelings: happy, excited, and frustrated. I was created as a sensory bear to explore emotions. I had a superhero cape, and the young girl's helpers talked lots about all the different feelings that people can feel and help the girl to understand more and more about her feelings. She would choose a feeling pillow to put into my superhero cape, showing what she was feeling, and replace these feelings when her pillows when her feelings changed. I felt so excited that she was able to do this without her people telling her to. She was slowly finding her voice. Over the time we worked together, I also told her my superhero adventures, and using this story, I was able to help her hear her past without shutting down. She shared her thoughts in this story, and so together we were able to create her life story.
Brown Bear remembered that story of his parents' first meeting. Thunder Girl and the therapeutic life story work concept of Think.Feel.Do spotted one another across the room and felt such an instant attraction. Brown Bear knows that he was created to help children across the world in all communities to be able to communicate what they think, feel and do. Therapeutic life story work was so very central to Brown Bear's existence.
Richard Rose's therapeutic love story work model is used by trained practitioners. Therapeutic love story work provides the child in out-of-home care or families who are part of the child protection system with the opportunity to hear from a number of people in their lives about positive, challenging, and sometimes conflicting stories that together form their narrative, allowing the child or adult to make meaning and have a sense of identity, purpose, self-identity, and strengthen connections to significant people in their lives. The idea of Think.Feel.Do is part of therapeutic life story work and is also part of modern business. It's weird. It is a methodology for measuring and improving communication in corporations and discovering more about their consumers. So what we've borrowed from this model for the Think.Feel.Do bears is understanding that each part of the model and the bear represents the underlying theories of human behaviour and development, so cognitive, emotional, and behavioural. It is also a simplified version of Kolb's reflective learning cycle: experience, feeling, analysis, plan, and act.
And so in that moment, Brown Bear was born.
The Think.Feel.Do bear is a fabric bear filled with heavy material and decorated with a brain, heart, and hands. You may have already touched or seen the Think.Feel.Do bears being passed around the room. This tool can help a child and adult understand and communicate their story through thinking about the experience of themselves or another through their thoughts, feelings, and actions. The particular words we can use as practitioners are: what do I think? What do I feel? What do I do?
Brown Bear smiled when he looked at pictures of his children and grandchildren.
I love them all too. Each Think.Feel.Do bear makes me smile.
Brown Bear remembered how worried and sad he'd felt when he met so many children and young people in his village who struggled to understand or express the way they felt and behaved. It sometimes seemed as if they couldn't unravel the muddles they felt in their heads. He remembered how glad he'd been to help them. He encouraged to think about what they were experiencing, to consider and find words to describe what they were feeling, and to speak about what they did or were doing. He also knew that children liked to stroke his soft fur and felt soothed when they handled his heavy body. And sometimes he allowed them or their helpers to use his voice to express what they wanted to say, especially when the words in the child's mind said such negative things about them.
Do you mean to externalise?
Yes, externalisation, exactly. And he knows there are many other children and young people and their families that aren't in his neck of the woods, who are struggling to communicate and understand their experience. Brown Bear often ponders the question of how to share these skills with others in communities around the world.
I know this story as well. Sapphire was the first Think.Feel.Do bear that found me.
Brown Bear remembered going to a conference with his eldest bear cub, Sapphire, because they loved sharing and hearing people's stories and ideas. They met an elder from across the oceans who was very wise and skilled at helping children understand their personal stories and their behaviours in the context of the difficulties and struggles they'd lived through. This wise elder, who was called Richard, got very excited when he met them. And he said, "I love what you do. I want to share what you do. Will you come with me on my travels?" Brown Bear was a little shy and he held back. However, Sapphire, always an adventurous kind of bear, stepped forward and agreed to travel across the seas and spread their story. Brown Bear was quite relieved that he could stay home because he still had a growing family to care for. Soon after this, Brown Bear met another elder, Elise, from a far distant corner of the land, who was very wise and experienced in working with children in out-of-home care. Elise was very interested in mentoring another of Brown Bear's children, Squidgy Bear, and took her under her wing. Together, Elise and Squidgy Bear worked with young people in residential homes, and they also travelled across the seas on adventures together and spoke at a conference in Portugal. Elise told us,
Our bears are being used in the current Victorian DHHS program, and they are adored by everyone who uses them, and are used as an essential part of the work. The bears were presented as an integral tool for the Therapeutic Work program when they were shared recently at the first International Therapeutic Work Conference in Portugal. The bears were one of the most popular tools discussed by practitioners from across the world, whether the practitioners be from a school setting, a mental health setting, or direct therapeutic setting.
the people at that conference loved Squidgy Bear's way of working and made plans to invite some Think.Feel.Do's bears to work with children and young people in their country. And these bears are now Brown Bear's cousins from Portugal. Time was getting on. Brown Bear took a deep breath and sighed. He gazed again at his family tree and wondered how his tribe was getting on out there in the big wide world. Some of them are in villages close by.
As a Think.Feel.Do bear, I have been part of individual supervision, team meetings, conversations with children, just being held, being bent into all kinds of shapes, and sometimes resting on someone's head or shoulder. I am a favourite in a shared space when people are trying to process an experience, feeling, or action.
This crocheted bear is part of the Coffs Harbour Think.Feel.Do bear tribe. The child protection team has been using the bears during conversations with children. They tell us they help children play, focus, relax, and have something to comfort them. It also allows children and their helpers to speak their thoughts and feelings.
Brown Bear thought about how his tribe are so loved in the villagers' homes.
The original bears, Brown Bear, Sapphire Bear, and Rainbow Bear, are so well loved by our own children. When they first came home for visits, we found they were taking turns having sleepovers in each of our children's beds and regularly sat down to have a meal with us.
Let me introduce Tara Bear.
My humans would let me come out for car trips, they would take me to the park, I would have tea parties with them in the garden, and I would be a part of everyday conversations. If one of my children had a hard day at school, we could reflect on what they think, feel, and want to do about it. Also, if some of my adult humans were having a hard day, they could reflect with their children about what they were thinking, feeling, and what they could do.
Brown Bear then thought about how his tribe played a part in the village meetings.
Think.Feel.Do bears attend supervision, training events, and team meetings with us. We find ourselves often checking in with what we think about something, how it makes us feel, and what we can do, both in our heads and out loud. We even found ourselves checking in using our bears with our colleagues and peers when faced with difficult challenges within our work. Think.Feel.Do bears just make sense on a professional and personal development level. It is the ultimate reflection tool.
I was taken along to a family group conference, thinking I would be supporting the child there. As it turned out, the child wasn't really interested in me, but an adult family member noticed me instead and found out more about me. I was held, stroked, and patted for the rest of the day by my new friend. I could feel how relaxed my new friend was as she helped her family during their time together.
Brown Bear then thought fondly about his youngest, Heart Bear, who's a special kind of bear. Heart Bear was never very good at thinking or doing. However, was very good at being a gentle and caring bear. She offered to go and support a young person who was not travelling well emotionally and needed a reminder that she was loved and remained in the thoughts of many people.
It is so important to remember that each Think.Feel.Do bear is unique and are useful for whatever their human needs them for. Think.Feel.Do bears are used with children and young people in therapeutic life story work. When we're exploring challenging stories, Think.Feel.Do bears can be really useful in helping us think about something, how it feels, and what can be done. And a lot of the times, the Think.Feel.Do bears allow us to empathise, serving as a tangible point of reference that helps the child or adult to consider their history and feelings in a thoughtful and considered way. Think.Feel.Do bears support the therapeutic life story work process so well and allows practitioners, children and their families opportunity to pause and reflect on the child's perspective of their story, and with this understanding comes meaningful growth and healing.
Let's hear from Denny Bear.
I'm the Think.Feel.Do bear for a young person who is part of therapeutic life story work sessions. I sat on the table to start and didn't expect it when I was picked up right away. They started talking about how heavy I was and my role was explained. How some young people, when we explore their lives, like to use me to talk about what they think, what they feel, and then what they do. I was held and examined for about 10 minutes. It was thoughtful and safe. My young person suggested that patches be added to my feet to talk about where we are going next, because sometimes when we talk about what we think, feel, and do, it means we might change direction, and I might change direction too. I thought this was very clever and very true. In all the sessions since then, I have been close by on the table, or I have been held by the person talking in case they need to talk about what they think, feel, and do.
I was surprised when I heard a story about the Think.Feel.Do bears being used in a new way. A friend of mine had just received 2 Think.Feel.Do bears for her practice. She got home so excited to share her bears with her family. Then she saw her 15-year-old sister was upset and she was worried. She shared her twin bears with an attitude of pace, with playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy.
And this is Baba Bear's story.
Apricot Bear and I sat across from each other being held. Sonia placed her hand on my brain and asked her sister Caroline what she was thinking about. Caroline started to talk but got all choked up. She moved her hand to Apricot Bear's heart and started to weep. Apricot Bear's heart was being squeezed so tightly as the poor girl began to talk. Her big sister moved her hand to my heart to show what was happening to her. Caroline was slowly calming down and started to talk about what was worrying her. Sonia moved her hand to my brain, and I saw Caroline notice and do the same with Apricot Bear. In this way, we managed to process some really hard experiences together.
Sonia mirrored her sister's movements, and her sister mirrored her movements back. Sonia was curious and accepting of her sister's words and actions. Sonia leaned into Caroline's story through the use of the Think.Feel.Do sensory bear. She demonstrated to her sister empathy, acceptance, and curiosity at a time she most needed it.
Brown Bear felt happy remembering the stories of his tribe. Brown Bear's dream continues to be for children to have a voice about what they're thinking, feeling, and doing. He knows this dream is shared by many others out there in the world, many who he'll never meet. He looks forward to his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren offering comfort, playing games, making new connections across communities, conferences, workplaces, and homes, following their passion to help give a voice to children.
So on behalf of Karen, Natalia, and I, not theirs anymore, we want to thank you, each one of you, for listening to us. It means the world to us that you've been able to meet Brown Bear and his tribe for the first time or again. Thank you for listening to his story and for being passionate in your work for children, young people, and their families. I hope this little story has inspired you a little more, and please continue the big dream of why the Think.Feel.Do sensory bears were created, to help children across the world in all communities to be able to communicate what they think, feel, and do.